In the past 24 hours, we've learned that the head of Queensland Health is resigning after his department recommended criminal penalties for staff who disclosed what's called inappropriate information to journalists. His resignation comes only 9 months after assuming the role on a multi-year contract. Meanwhile, the state's health system remains in chaos. Ambulance ramping at record highs, patients who can't get into a doctor when they're in emergency, and elective surgery lists that are blowing out. The situation is so bad that almost 60,000 Queenslanders are currently waiting for elective surgery. That's nearly double the amount than when the Premier first came to office in 2015. Add in the fact that nearly 300,000 are stuck on the specialist outpatient waiting list, a figure that's grown in the last 2 years by nearly 40,000. Joining me to discuss this and more, Queensland Opposition Leader David Crisafulli. Well, David, we've talked uphill and down dale about health for some months now. What on earth is going on?
2 words, Peter: chaos and crisis. And Queenslanders are living it every day. And you mentioned that contract. That Director General was less than a year into a 5-year contract, handpicked by the Premier. Now, you've worked at the highest levels of government. Imagine this situation. The Premier of the state stands up at a media conference and says, I've accepted the Director General's resignation yesterday. Simultaneously, the Health Minister, who this person reports to, stands up and says, I have full confidence in the Director General. Now, that is extraordinary. We have a government that's not only no longer listening to Queenslanders, they're not even listening to themselves anymore. This is outrageous. It is extraordinary, and it shows you why Queensland Health is in crisis, because the government is at war with themselves and they, quite frankly, have stopped doing their job.
And throw in the mix too, you've got a new minister yet again. How do Queenslanders have any confidence in the system?
Well, they don't, Peter, and the sad problem is it manifests itself every time somebody relies on that health system. And don't blame the doctors or the nurses or the allied health professionals. They're the ones who are ringing us saying, please shine a light on this. The system is broken. And we've done what oppositions often get accused of not doing. We've put solutions forward. We want the government to take them. Better resources, better triaging, sharing data in real time, putting those doctors and nurses back in charge. We want this health system to work. We have ambulance ramping at the highest level anywhere in the country, surgery waiting lists blowing out, and a government that is just all about itself, fixated on its political survival, and after a decade in office seeking a 4th term and 14 years in power, and they've just given up on listening to Queenslanders.
Something that I know really matters in government, and this is reshuffles and where departments fall. I mean, it's absolutely critical. It's been picked up out of Queensland by the Auditor General. A lot of concern about the number of cabinet reshuffles you had up there, the most recent one in May. 11 functions were transferred between 10 departments. The 4th time in just 6 years that youth justice has been shuffled around. This is part of the basket case that is Queensland.
It's a significant report, Peter, and it makes for sobering reading. And what it says is that every time you embark on what they call a machinery of government, and all it is about dislocating departments, but every time you do that, there is a cost. And that cost is both financial, but it's also the ability for the public service to serve. And when the Premier did the reshuffle, where she moved the same people around into different departments, and they then dismantled some of those departments and put those functions elsewhere, the Premier said, no, this doesn't cost any money and it's business as usual. Well, this report bells the cat on that, and it shows that it costs millions of dollars. But worse than that, it distracts the public service. And you mentioned the youth crime crisis. Well, that department has been put here, there, with different ministers. It's been changed so many times. The only thing that hasn't changed is community safety. That's got worse. And it's 6 months to the day since the Premier announced her latest 10-point announcement. Well, car thefts are up 12% and break and enters are up 10%. That's just in the last 6 months when they're supposedly taking it seriously. It is in dire straits right here.
Yeah, I'll say to my viewers at home, this I know intimately from Canberra, it allows, when you have these constant reshuffles, poor performers in departments to hide, right? The public service just wait out a minister who's putting them under pressure, they get moved on and they then just survive, you know, they don't go anywhere, they're almost protected by the system. So this really, really matters. Before we go, this change of the name of Brisbane coming into the Olympic Games, Meanjin, which is the Aboriginal name, it was touted. The Premier says, oh, it's not going to happen. Well, we don't believe her. She's just renamed Fraser Island. What do you think? If you're Premier, David, are you going to do this?
Absolutely not. And the everyday Queenslander would be sitting at home tonight, shaking their head, saying, why on earth is this a priority for government? Think about the issues that are besetting them at the moment. They're struggling to make ends meet with rising power prices. They've got a youth crime crisis, a health crisis. Their kids can't get into a home. And the government's focus is on changing the name of Brisbane? No, that is not a priority for anyone. And people will look at that and see a government that has checked out of doing their job. Get back to work, the lot of you.
I tell you what, if it were more like you, David Crisafulli, the Liberal Party wouldn't be out of government around the country. All the best. Thank you for your time, as always.